In 2013, one of the most recognizable entertainment companies on the planet posted its first financial loss in 3 decades. Analysts started asking a question out loud that would have been unthinkable a few years earlier. Was Nintendo finished? Its new console, the Wii U, had just bombed. Badly. Stores were quietly returning unsold units. Executives were taking pay cuts. And inside the company's headquarters in Kyoto, the man running the show stood in front of cameras and said 3 words that, in Japan, carry enormous weight. Please understand. Here's the strange part. This wasn't even the first time this company had stared down its own death. Not the second time either. This was, by some counts, the 3rd or 4th time. And every single time, the company that walked away from the wreckage came back bigger than before. So how does a company keep almost dying and keep winning anyway?
To answer that, you have to go back. Not to the 1980s, not to Mario. You have to go back to 1889, to a small workshop in Kyoto, where a craftsman is hand-painting flowers, moons, and deer onto strips of mulberry bark. His name is Fusajiro Yamauchi. He calls his little company Nintendo Kopai. Loosely translated, the name means something like leave luck to heaven. And what he's making isn't a video game. It's a deck of cards. Hanafuda cards, 48 of them per deck, painted by hand, with no numbers and no suits anyone outside Japan would recognize. Just images. A pine tree for January, a plum blossom for February. They're beautiful. They're also, in a roundabout way, illegal. Western-style playing cards had been banned in Japan for years because of their ties to gambling. But Hanafuda cards had no numbers on them at all, so technically, they slipped through. Everyone knew exactly what that loophole was for. And as Yamauchi's cards grew popular, they caught the attention of exactly the people you'd expect. Japan's organized crime networks. The Yakuza started using them. Some members even tattooed Yamauchi's artwork onto their bodies.
Most card makers panicked and pulled back. Too risky, too close to the underworld. Yamauchi did the opposite. He leaned in. While his competitors retreated, he expanded, hired more apprentices, opened more shops, and turned his little workshop into the dominant Hanafuda producer in Japan, serving everyone, including the gangsters. The company that would eventually give the world Super Mario built its first empire selling playing cards to criminals. And here's the thing. That instinct to walk toward the thing everyone else was running from didn't disappear. It got passed down. And decades later, it would nearly destroy the company before it saved it. Fast forward to 1949. Nintendo is now 60 years old, still selling cards, and the man in charge has just had a stroke. Following Japanese tradition, the company is passed down through adopted heirs, and now it lands on a 22-year-old law student named Hiroshi Yamauchi. He has no business training, no management experience. He has never worked a single day at the company he's about to run. His first move as president, he fires half the management team. Hiroshi quickly realizes the card business has a hard ceiling. He visits the largest playing card manufacturer in America and discovers it operates out of what's basically a small office. That's it. That's the entire ceiling of this industry. And Hiroshi Yamauchi decides he's not going to accept it.
So he starts experimenting, and here's where the story takes a turn nobody expects. He launches a brand of instant rice, individually portioned, easy to cook, sure to revolutionize Japanese kitchens. It's a total disaster. Turns out, people in Japan have very strong opinions about their rice. He pivots to a taxi company. That one actually works, for a while, until the labor unions push back on wages, and rather than negotiate, Yamauchi just sells the whole thing off. Then he tries something else entirely, a chain of love hotels. Short-stay rooms rented by the hour, hugely popular in 1960s Japan.
And this is where it gets really strange. Because guess who notices this new cash-heavy business and wants a cut of the profits? The Yakuza, Nintendo's old card customers. The venture quietly disappears. By the mid-1960s, Hiroshi Yamauchi has tried rice, taxis, hotels, vacuum cleaners, toys, and failed at almost all of it. The card business is shrinking. Nintendo is on the edge of bankruptcy. Real bankruptcy. The kind that ends companies. And then, almost by accident, everything changes.
Yamauchi is walking through one of his own factories when he notices a maintenance worker, a young engineer named Gunpei Yokoi, fiddling with something on his brake. It's a homemade mechanical arm, an extending claw built out of scrap plastic, for no reason other than the guy was bored and liked building things. Yamauchi doesn't walk past it. He stops, looks at it, and tells Yokoi to turn it into a real product by Christmas. That toy, the Ultra Hand, sells 1.2 million units in its first year. Nintendo had finally found its future. Not in food, not in taxis, not in hotels, in toys, and in the quiet curiosity of a janitor who built things for fun. Now, jump forward again. It's the early 1980s, and on the other side of the world, something massive is happening, and then collapsing. By 1983, the video game industry in America is generating nearly $3 billion a year, more than Hollywood. Atari is king, sitting in over 12 million homes. And then, in the span of about 18 months, it all falls apart. Revenue craters from $3 billion down to $100 million, a drop of almost 97%. The shelves had been flooded with cheap, low-quality games. Nobody could tell good from bad anymore, and people simply stopped buying. Retailers who'd bet big on consoles got buried. The press didn't mince words. They called it the video game crash, and they declared the entire industry dead, over, a fad that had run its course.
And into that wreckage, Nintendo walks in. In Japan, Nintendo's home console, the Famicom, had just launched, right as the American market was imploding. It was a hit at home, but Hiroshi Yamauchi wanted America. His team flew to New York, hoping to partner with Atari for distribution. The talks collapsed. Atari was too busy falling apart internally to care. So Nintendo went in alone. And here's where the real strategy kicks in. They understood something the rest of the industry had missed. You cannot walk into a market that just got burned and sell people the exact same thing that burned them. The word game was poison, so they erased it. They didn't call it a game console. They called it the Nintendo Entertainment System. They redesigned the whole thing to look like a VCR with a front-loading slot, because VCRs were trusted and games were not. They didn't call the cartridges games. They called them game packs. They bundled it with a small, mostly useless robot called Rob, just to make the whole package look like serious consumer electronics instead of a toy. And then they made retailers an offer nobody could refuse. 100% return policy on anything that didn't sell. Nintendo absorbed all the risk. Stores had literally nothing to lose. The console launched in New York in October 1985. Nintendo's team drove from store to store themselves, setting up the displays, running the demos in person. By 1988, just 3 years later, Nintendo controlled 80% of the American video game market. The industry everyone had pronounced dead was generating $3 billion again, and Nintendo had rebuilt almost the entire thing by itself. That's the first comeback. But it's not the last. And the next one centers on a person whose name most players outside Japan barely know. His name is Satoru Iwata. Growing up in Sapporo, he taught himself to build games on a programmable calculator just to see if he could. While studying computer science in Tokyo, he started working part-time at a small studio called HAL Laboratory. He wasn't just a coder.
In 1994, when Nintendo handed Hal a wrestling game that needed to run on hardware tighter than originally planned, Iwata rewrote the entire engine in days. That's the kind of person he was. By 1993, HAL Laboratory itself was on the brink of bankruptcy. Yamauchi made an unusual call. He had Iwata, at just 33, appointed president of the company. A programmer, no management background. Within a few years, Iwata had turned HAL completely around. In 2002, after 52 years running Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi finally stepped down. And Iwata became president. The first person to lead Nintendo who wasn't from the Yamauchi family in the company's entire 113-year history.
He inherited a mess. The GameCube had just been thoroughly beaten by Sony's PlayStation 2. The industry was chasing bigger, more complex, more expensive games, and a lot of people thought Nintendo simply couldn't keep up anymore. Iwata's answer wasn't to fight harder on the same battlefield. It was to find a different one entirely. He called it the Blue Ocean strategy. Stop competing for the same players as everyone else and go find the people who weren't playing games at all. In 2004, the Nintendo DS launched with 2 screens and a touchscreen, which looked strange at the time, and became one of the best-selling handheld consoles ever made. Then, in 2006, came the Wii. It asked people to stand up, to swing their arms, to bowl, box, and play tennis using a controller that tracked physical movement. The graphics were weak. Hardcore gamers mocked it openly. And then, grandparents started buying it. Care homes started using it for physical therapy. Families who had never owned a games console were suddenly playing together on Sunday afternoons. The Wii went on to sell over 100 million units. At the time, the best-selling home console Nintendo had ever made. By 2009, Iwata was being named one of the top CEOs in the world. And then, quietly, it all started falling apart again.
This is where Wii came in. The Wii U launched in 2012 with a genuinely clever idea. A controller with its own built-in screen, so you could keep playing even if someone else needed the TV. But the marketing was so confusing that most shoppers thought it was just an accessory for the original Wii, not a brand new console. Software was thin. The name itself didn't help. Wii U sounds like an upgrade, not a new machine. Over its entire 4-year life, the Wii U sold 13.5 million units. The Wii had sold over 100 million. Nintendo posted its first operating loss in 30 years. And this time, the question wasn't whether Nintendo would bounce back. It was whether Nintendo would survive as a hardware company at all. Iwata took a 50% pay cut himself rather than lay off staff. He went in front of the cameras and asked the public to please understand. Behind the scenes, he kept working, pouring himself into Nintendo's next console, the one meant to fix everything the Wii U had gotten wrong.
In July 2015, at 55 years old, Satoru Iwata died of cancer. He never got to see what came next. In January 2017, surveys of game industry insiders found that only half of them believed Nintendo's next console would even outsell the failed Wii U. That was the bar. Could this company clear its own lowest point? The console had been developed in secret under the codename Project NX. Its idea was almost embarrassingly simple. What if the same device worked as a console on your TV and as a handheld the moment you picked it up and walked away? On March 3, 2017, the Nintendo Switch launched alongside a game called The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, a game critics would go on to call one of the greatest ever made. People lined up outside stores at midnight.
By December of that same year, the Switch had already outsold the Wii U's entire 4-year lifetime total in under 10 months. And it kept going,
record quarter after record quarter. During the pandemic, Animal Crossing New Horizons sold 13 million copies in its first 6 weeks as people stuck at home turned to a quiet, gentle world built by the same company that decades earlier had been selling cards to gangsters. The Switch went on to sell over 150 million units, becoming one of the best-selling consoles in history. And Nintendo, a company that had failed at rice, failed at taxis, failed at love hotels, lost 80% of its console business almost overnight, and buried the man who just saved it twice, became, once again, the most valuable company in Japan. So what's the actual answer to the question we started with? How does a company keep almost dying and keep winning anyway? It's not a master plan. There was no 5-year strategy document that predicted any of this. What kept this company alive again and again was something much less tidy. A willingness to be embarrassed in public and try again anyway. Hiroshi Yamauchi once said that when results failed, 99% of the responsibility was his. He meant it, and then he went and tried something else. Satoru Iwata cut his own pay before he cut anyone else's, and kept building until the day he couldn't anymore. The janitor, who became one of gaming's most important inventors, built things in his spare time simply because he was curious what would happen. Cards, rice, taxis, hotels, robots that did nothing, a console nobody believed in. Over 135 years, almost none of it went according to plan.
And maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this story, the one nobody tells you when they talk about Nintendo's success. It was never about having the right answer. It was about being willing to keep asking the question and leaving the rest, as the company's name has always said, to luck and to heaven.
If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more incredible true events, forgotten histories, and fascinating mysteries, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us create more videos like this and bring these amazing stories to life. And if you have any thoughts or theories about today's story, share them in the comments below. We read every one of them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.